I reside in Waco, a rural area of Texas. I reside in a little town named China Spring, which is surrounded by forests and trees. My parents just decided to build a modest fence to protect our 2 dogs from wandering into my neighbor's yard, since they have 2 pit bulls and once attacked our cat. We don't want it to happen to our pets again. The old fence had begun to rust, so we would need to replace the rotting boards on our side of the fence. Keeping that in mind, we put up little metal chicken wire to keep them up. When I went out to help construct the fence, our neighbor came out yelling at us before we even put the first panel up. She made fun of my father's prior difficulties with alcohol and drugs, and even insulted him for being a cancer survivor. I'd had enough by that point, so I urged her to simply get to the part where she complained to Dawn about how she didn't want to fence up our animals since they were in their yard. I attempted to explain that this was our side of the property and that it would only keep our animals out of their yard. She was having none of it. She began shouting at us again, like if she were a maniac. We weren't listening for long, and we were heading back up to the home. Things between us and our neighbors have never been the same since. We eventually phoned the fencing company one morning to come in and erect a 6-foot fence around our property, as well as gates with passcodes so only we could get in. We got our own privacy back when the fence was up, and to be honest, it was lovely for a while. We began getting phone calls from random numbers telling us that we needed to pull down our fence or awful things would happen, and other nonsense like that. One day, I was home alone, and one of those numbers phoned again. This time, the individual stated we'd have a visit if we didn't take down the barrier. I was fired up at that point, so I contacted my brother, who attended the local college in our town, and informed him about our neighbor's difficulties. I asked if you wanted to come down and help me straighten this out right now. I'm sure you're wondering why we didn't contact the cops. We tried many times, but they stated it would be difficult to locate the line since it was a charred phone that was most likely destroyed. When my brother arrived to assist me, we decided to spend the night in his vehicle and wait. We were becoming exhausted after a few hours. We eventually observed my neighbor, the guy, come out of his home and into his garden shed after another hour or so. As if it wasn't suspicious enough, we fell asleep only to be awakened by the sound of clanging metal under the hood. Someone had opened our hood, and when they closed it, we noticed my neighbor standing right in front of us, holding a pair of pliers. He bolted back towards the fence line, and my brother had every intention of pursuing him. We got out of the vehicle and ran after him. He attempted to open his door and enter his home, but we grabbed him, grappling him to the ground. His wife screamed at the door, and then she unleashed the pit bulls on us. While she was still struggling her husband, the 2 pit dogs came on us and began to tear at us and growl. I heard my parents leave the home. My father began to shout at me to flee, but it was too late. One of the dogs had grabbed my hand and was chewing and tearing at my arm. My brother eventually wiggled free from the other dog's clutches and rescued me from the one biting my arm. My brother needed stitches on his face and elbows after the dogs gnawed on him. As for my brother's vehicle, my neighbor went to have x-rays for broken bones and head trauma, and I had 3 operations on my arms to restore the tissue that had been destroyed and the bones that had been fractured and pulled. The neighbor had apparently been messing with the brake cables, gas, and engine. What bothers me the most is that when we returned home, we discovered that a portion of the fence had been hacked into and the metal gate had been wrenched open enough for an adult to fit between the bars. It makes me wonder what would have occurred if my brother and I had not opted to spend the night in this vehicle.